Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa alihi wa ashabi ajma'een. So we finished covering the impurities, the methods of purification etiquettes, right? We said that if you had something of najasa, some defilement on your clothes, and you needed to make wudu, can you make wudu with that defilement on your clothes? Yes, no, maybe so, who knows?
I think you just have to put water over it.
Well, that's how to clean the najasa, but can you actually make wudu with that najasa on your pants? Dog rubbed on you and it was just, there's some traces of poop. Can you make wudu now with that on your pants? Or your skirt, or your clothes? What? So the answer is you can, but you still have to clean that before you can make salah, right? Because that clothing doesn't invalidate your wudu. All right, so if what is the minimum if a guy wanted to stand and use the urinal? What must he do if he's standing using the urinal? Take a piece of napkin or tissue, toilet tissue with them, and wipe. That is the minimum, right? You can't just not wipe. And they don't have those power washers next to the urinal, so you're out of luck there. All right. So, all right, these are little things that I'm gonna just throw out there so that we're all on the same page, right? Okay, so let's actually cover wudu. Let me see. We'll try to cover the arkan. I'll try to cover as much of it as I possibly can, to be honest with you. We'll try to go quick, and you can write these things down. So those of you who are typing, you can type a little fast if you can. Okay, so the prerequisites for wudu. You need to be a Muslim. You need to be a Muslim. You need to also have tamyiz, the age of discernment. You have to know what you're doing. Intention, it's a prerequisite, right? You have to intend to do wudu. Although some scholars said you don't need the intention. Like who? The Hanafi scholars said you don't. And you know why he said? Abu Hanif said you don't? He said because there is no action on earth left by any nation that performs these rituals except Muslims. Right? That's why you find it interesting. Abu Hanifa said you need to have the intention for ghusl, because anybody could take a shower, right? And so that's also very important when we come to ghusl, that if you're doing ghusl as a purification, you have to have the intention. It can't just be to go take a nice warm or hot shower or cold shower. Okay, that's a side note. Anyhow, remove any najasa using the lavatory, on your private areas, your skin. And remove any obstacles that would hinder reaching the mandatory parts, right? We mentioned this, nail polish, right? I don't know what guys would put on that would invalidate it, that would prevent water from getting, but if you could think of something, I'm all ears. What?
Socks. People would say that.
Socks is valid. You're actually allowed to make wudu over your socks. We'll cover that next week or this week or whenever, I don't know when. But since we're not going to rush, obviously we have 2 weeks and we'll probably cover this a little bit more properly. But anyhow, using water that is pure, right? The type of water we mentioned. Okay, the golden verse is Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse number 6. That is part of that verse is where Allah Azza wa Jal commands us on how to clean ourselves. Allah Azza wa Jal says in part of the verse, He said, فَاغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ وَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ وَأَرْجُلَكُمْ إِلَى الْكَعْبَيْنِ. So Allah Azza says that when you wash your faces, your forearms, arms to the elbows, and wipe over your heads, and wash your feet to the ankles. So 4 things Allah Azza mentioned. These are, I'm going to cover this in 2 parts. One is the minimum, the mandatory things you need for a valid wudu, and then I'm going to cover how the Prophet ﷺ, a perfect wudu should be performed. Now I am going to warn you. Knowing this is a double-edged sword, okay? So for those of you who are doing it properly, the right way, the 3 times, may Allah reward you. And I hope that knowing this knowledge doesn't move it lower. Because I could tell you, I'm guilty of it. When I learned this, I was like, oh, it's just got like 10 times easier, right? And so for a while, doing, which is not good, right? And especially thought of ilm, that's very shameful. So, bidnillah, after this lecture, we'll be motivated to do it how the Prophet ﷺ did it and how all the Anbiya did it as well. The Rasul ﷺ, a man came to me and said, Ya Rasulullah, I do not know how to make wudu. He said, Tawadda kama amarak Allah. He said, you make wudu how Allah instructed you in the Quran. Very simple. And so these four. The very, very minimum is the following four. Some Hanabila included 5, which is the first. They said the intention is required, but according to the overwhelming majority, it is not. It's more of a shart. It is a prerequisite than it is a rukun. And before I get into the whole fiqh, I know you guys didn't study usul al-fiqh or anything like that, but essentially there's an action. There's a prerequisite to doing that action. There's the action itself and the pillars of that action. So wudu, the mandatory parts, they would call them rukun. So if you hear somebody say these are arkan al-wudu, these are arkan al-salah, right? Things like that. Arkan al-siyam. Like, this is like doing the bare minimum. And if you miss one of them, you've invalidated that action. So there's the prerequisite, the actual action, which is a mandatory part, and the pillar of it, which is a rukun. And then there's the sunnah part. Some of the Hanabila have a third category, which say the wajibat, which there needs to be a correction, but they have that in salah anyway, not in wudu. Anyhow, okay, you got that overview? Did I confuse anybody? Because when I mention these words, I just don't want you to go, what on earth is he talking about? We're all on the same page, I can move on. Okay, number 1, Allah said it very clearly. He said, wash the face completely once, right? He said your face, then he said your arms up to the elbows. Arms up to elbows. What is the face though? The face is the hairline to the bottom of the chin and side to side. So it's your face. It's when you look at somebody and they see them. They can see you. That's why some scholars said the area between the sideburns and the ears for the guys, it's okay. Although some scholars said you should do it if you have thin sideburns. Why? Because then you can see it. Great, no problem, right? Okay, so then you have the face from here, that line going around. That is the minimum, and that needs to be once. Then you have the arms up to the elbows, and then some scholars, there's the whole debate. Do we include the elbow? Do we not? Just do the elbow. Just really, I mean, there was sometimes we would be in these debates and we'd look at them and just, it's really not that serious. But anyhow, so arms, elbows once, okay? And do you have to be pouring water? No, because you can wipe also, which is if you wet your hand and you wipe, you can do that. The difference between wiping and washing is if there's drops. That's really essentially it. If you see drops on the floor or in the sink after you're, doing your wudu, you're washing. And by the way, washing is fine and wiping is fine. Okay, also, the head, you wipe once. How much of the head? You don't, according to some scholars, you don't need the ears, but in one narration, the Rasul ﷺ said the ears are part of the head. Okay? So, you might say, do I include the ears? Do I not? According to the majority, the ears are not included. Got that part? Okay? So, the head. How much of the head? We'll go over that in the sunnah part, but the minimum, the absolute minimum, let me give you all the difference of opinions because there's a lot. Some scholars said a quarter of the head is mandatory, and that's because of a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ was making wudu. He had his turban, he moved it up like this, and they said about a quarter of his head was showing. He wiped here, and then he wiped over the rest of his turban. Caught that part? The Hanabila used this to say, no, the entire head. And that hadith is evidence because he wiped over the rest of the head, right? The Shafi'i said, when Allah Azza wa Jalla said in the Quran, وَأَمْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسَكُمْ, right? بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ. This bah, the Arabic letter bah, بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ, means 2. When it's used in Arabic, it means 2. So they said the bare minimum, like you're really in a drought, is 2 hairs. That's really it. That's what they said. 2 hairs. 2 hair pieces. If you could find 2 hairs, get them. They said that's the minimum, right? Oh, sorry, 3 strands of hair, because bah is 3 in Arabic, okay? Anyhow, some scholars said the entire thing, and some of my teachers agree with them. But anyhow, the head, you wipe all the way back to here. They said the whole head is the minimum. But according to most of my teachers, obviously they follow the Shafi'i opinion, so they go with just a few strands of hair. Okay, now, but you have that difference. I mean, on the safe side, obviously just wipe your entire head. You'll avoid any conflict. Now, also, then wash the feet up to the ankles once, and if you have socks, wet each hand and wipe over that sock, right? As long as you had wudu underneath before that, right? Okay. This must be done in order, or can we do it in any order? According to Imam Shafi'i and Imam Ahmad, the order is required because the Rasul said, "Tawadda kama amarak Allah," and Allah put them in this order, right? Some other scholars, like the Hanafis and the Malikis, they said the order is a sunnah itself, the sunnah itself, right? Nonetheless, and they gave their whole thing. But if I go into all of the minimal reasons of debates, really we're not going to get anywhere. We'll stay just on the arkan. Okay, and also this must be done continuously. So those four actions have to be done continuously. Who thinks they can define what continuously means? Let me give you an example. You started making wudu, you wiped your face, you started with the right arm, then you got a phone call. I took the phone call. Can I go back with my left arm?
Depends if you're dry or not.
Depends?
If you're dry or not.
What's dry or not? It's specific.
The place that you just washed. Yeah.
The first place you washed. Because that shows it's continuous. So if you took a long conversation and your face is no longer wet, then you cannot do that. It's not continuous because the first to the end has to be wet. That gives you the continuity, right? So there you go. And yes, you can speak during wudu, you can take a phone call, etc. It doesn't invalidate your wudu, okay? Just so we're all on the same page. All right? Let's say you get to the masjid and they are praying. They are praying. Should you do, and you don't have wudu, this would help you. Why? Because when you have the actual action that you're trying to take on, like for example, the objective of wudu is what? Anything, right? Salah, whatever is recommended too. We'll mention that next week. We want to read Quran, it's recommended to have wudu, etc. So you have the objective. So when you came to the masjid, the ultimate objective is to pray, right? And so what you want to do, they're already starting their first rak'ah, you want to do the minimum you possibly can in the wudu so you can catch the objective, right? So you sacrifice the means so that you can get to the objective, right? So that's very, very important that you have to think about. Always think about the objective. What would Allah Azza wa Jal want from me right now? You could sit there and do the whole thing, which we're going to go over, take the pinky, go between the toes, and he'll be on his last rak'ah and he says, that's my wudu, mashallah, I'm ready now. Well, the whole point, you just missed the entire salah. It's like when we were studying, I'll never forget this, we went to pray dhuhr in the masjid after one of our lectures, and they had already started the salah. So we started the salah and you pray. So after we finished, he said, man, I really wish I caught it so I could have prayed the fard. One of my classmates. And I said, what are you talking about? We just prayed fard. He said, no. He goes, I made the intention for sunnah because I never miss my sunnah, and so I didn't want to miss it here. My teacher overheard us talking. He said the shaitan is laughing at him right now. He said it in Arabic. He said the shaitan is making fun of him right now. He made him lose on the ajr jama'ah so he can make himself feel cozy that he's never missed the sunnah. Anytime something fard comes up, there is no other salah. There is no other salah. So let's say that's the reason you'll see maybe next semester, if Allah gives us life, that if you'll see some of the scholars, they said that if you were praying your Tahiyyat al-Masjid or your salah, it's a nafil prayer, and the imam got up to pray, if you're even going to miss the opening takbir, They said you should break your salah and continue. They debate, whether you should break it or continue, etc. But that's to that extent because a fard salah has happened, right? Some scholars said if you think you're going to miss the first rak'ah, then definitely you have to stop that salah. But nonetheless, but I'm trying to show you, don't be silly. We always need the fard. That's the most important thing. Okay, so those four. Is it hard to understand? No, right? Now we're going to go over the perfect wudu. The perfect wudu, this is where you should try to pay as close attention as possible. A rule of thumb is nothing is done more than 3 times. I'll say it again. Nothing is done more than 3 times ever. Okay? Yeah.
So what if you do a spa like, I guess, more than 3 times to make sure that you, I guess, did it properly?
Nope. The Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam never did it more than 3. No Sahaba, nobody's ever said anything more than 3. That's it. You got 3 times. If you're one of those OCD people, you got 3 shots. That's it. 3 and done. You move on to the next one. Right? And this is a beauty in the religion too, right, by the way, because some people, they're so overly obsessed with trying to do, to get to perfection. The Islam helps us in this regard, right? It takes you a step back, says, listen, you got to move on. That's it. Some people, they have an obsession with these kind of things, but Allah Azza wa Jal made it very easy for us. And that also, I'd rather not open that can of worms. So, okay. See, sometimes when I talk to myself, it helps. All right, number 1, the intention for purifying yourself and removing impurity. The intention should not be spoken, but it's in the heart. So this is your everyday wudu, right? You're intending to make wudu. Some scholars have a whole thing about the intention for wudu, and if you want to read Quran and you made wudu for reading Quran, and then Salat al-Dhuhr or a Fard Salah came up, you got to go make wudu again, because that wudu was for a sunnah and it wasn't for a fard, and they go into all this stuff, folks. And what I will tell you is there is nothing in the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ about any of that. Like 0, right? And that's where we thank Abu Hanifa for coming out with his explanation, because really he hit that one nail on the head. That's it. Wudu is wudu. Right? Don't make this complicated. Oh, what am I making this wudu for? What are you talking about? Just make your wudu. Don't get all nuts on me. Is this wudu to walk to the masjid, or was it for salah? It'll never end, by the way. It will never end. Because the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, after he would lose his wudu, he would make wudu. He would go and make his wudu, like he was always on wudu. Right? That's the sunnah, like he's always on wudu. And then you'll go nuts. You'll say, oh, I made wudu. But I made wudu because the Prophet made wudu. But that's a sunnah. Am I going to do a fard salah right now? What's going on? I'm telling you, when I saw some of these guys from some of our classmates explaining, and they were convinced by it. When I tell you it's madness, it's madness. So that's it. Wudu is wudu, and I don't want to hear anything about it. If some of your teachers have that opinion, may Allah reward them. That's great. Make 10 wudu today for all we care. But wudu is wudu, and we're not making it harder than that. Okay, alhamdulillah. So the intention, we want an intention. Although Abu Hanifa said there is no intention because it's so unique, according to the majority of scholars, there is an intention, because the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, that every action is judged by an intention. But your intention is for what, did we say? For what? Just wudu. That's it, right? You're just intending to make wudu. Very simple. All right. Some scholars said if you forget to make that intention, you need to start over even if you realize it in the middle of your wudu. Some scholars mentioned that. Okay? Some scholars went as far to invalidate the entire thing. All right? The entire wudu. But anyhow, like we said, everybody who's going to make wudu, right? You're pretty much, you know what you're doing. Okay, next, you say Bismillah. Bismillah. According to some scholars, it is a requirement to say Bismillah, because the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, لا صلاة من غير وضوء ولا وضوء من غير التسمية. That there is no salah without wudu, and there is no wudu without the tasmiyah, without saying Bismillah. Now that's something strong right there. And yet the majority of scholars still said saying Bismillah is sunnah. Who can tell me why? Why?
Well, when you usually make wudu, it's usually in the bathroom.
No, that's your time. They never had that concept. Don't forget back then, right? If you needed to use the bathroom, you went blah, you went in the out, like away from people. They had an outhouse, kind of, sort of speak. Some places did, but that's not where they made wudu. That's where they used the bathroom, and then boom, you shut that door.
If you had to say Bismillah, it would have been in the verse in Surah Ma'idah.
Nail on the head. May Allah reward you. If you had to say Bismillah, the scholar said Allah would have mentioned it in the ayah in the Quran. So it's still a sunnah. And according to Imam Malik, if you forgot to say Bismillah, you don't say it again because it's a sunnah. You don't go back to it in the middle of it because you're already doing fard. According to others, the majority, you could just say it. If you forgot to say it at the beginning, just say it when you remember. You could say Bismillah. Okay? Let's see. Like, by the way, there's so much stuff I'm skipping. You probably don't realize that, like why their evidence and why Imam Ahmad actually mentioned it, even though it was a weak narration. In some, like there's a narration, that there's no wudu for the one who does not mention Allah's name. But anyhow, again, I could go over why he narrated it, even though he considered it weak, because he only had two classifications of hadith at his time, sahih and daif. He only used two. Later on came hasan and acceptable, etc. Yeah.
Don't do a verbal niyyah?
The saying Bismillah is not niyyah. That's saying in the name of Allah.
Before that.
Yeah, no, you don't say the intention out loud. Yep. Because the Rasul said, "Innamal a'malu binniyat." Your action will be judged by the intention you had for it, right? You don't have to say it out loud. You don't say it out loud. Okay. So what if we said some people are following the opinion of Imam Ahmad? You must say Bismillah. You must say Bismillah, and you're in the bathroom. Then what do? When you have a conflict of something that is wajib versus something that is haram, you do the wajib. So you'd still say it. The other thing is Sufyan al-Thawri or Imam al-Thawri, I can't remember which one. They said that the area that you're not allowed to make azkar of Allah is the area in front of the place you're going to defecate or use the restroom, right? So in front of the toilet, in front of the urinal. We mentioned that, though, unfortunately, some bathrooms are designed in a way that the sink in the lavatory, right, is right in front of the toilet, right? So the vanity. So that's where you'll find in that little catch-22. So if you do believe that you have to say Bismillah, well, it's really easy, right? Just step to the side, say Bismillah, and just walk right back there. I'm serious, right? It's not really that complicated. Anyhow, I mean, it takes 2 seconds. You're right, not even. All right. Next, you want to wash your hands to your wrists 3 times. Washing your hands, this is not the arms one, this is washing your hands, right? So that you can wash the rest of your body, your areas with wudu, with water, purifying yourself. So washing the hands 3 times. Some scholars said that it is mandatory if you woke up from sleep because you don't know where your hand's been. Questionable. I don't know. Anyhow, but we don't have anything hardcore or concrete. Yeah, I don't know what there goes on with those folks. But anyhow, you wash your hands 3 times to the wrist. Then they said you wash your mouth. This is the sunnah, right? You start with the mouth. So what's the first action we're doing? You could do the hands, right? Then you do the mouth. You take water and you do the madmada, which is you're doing the mouth and the nose in the same scoop. In the same scoop, you take water and you go here and up in the nose in the same scoop, in the same hand. If you did them separately, that is fine. And you do this 3 times. The madmada and the istinshat, right? Here and the nose. And the Rasul ﷺ said, exaggerate when you do that. Yeah, and you really get in there. Clean it up. But I will tell you something now. I've seen some nasty things going on right now. And I mean it. I've seen some guys throw darts with their boogers. It's the most disgusting thing I've ever seen, ever. Like they're just, one of these, and they're just jamming them out. And I'm telling you, you want to know how COVID spread? Ask these guys how they make wudu. It's a mess. That's not what he was talking about. Here, and then the left hand covered covered, and then you rinse that out. Got it? Left hand, right hand in, left hand. So I don't want to do it and get anything wet. So I'm gonna scoop my water up in. I'm doing it a lot, like I'm exaggerating, and going up, right? Gargling the water. You do not do that in Ramadan. You do not do that with your fasting. I remember my father telling me when he came home one day, he said, you know, this guy came to the store and he said, you know, alhamdulillah, at least it was a tough summer, very, very hot. He said, alhamdulillah, at least for salah. He said, why? He said, when we make wudu, at least, you know, some. We're like, what? What do some what? Because, you know, when you make wudu and you do the madmadah, this guy's been sipping away, you know? He's been making wudu before every sunnah, before every fard. He's the cleanest guy you'll meet in 30 days. But this is invalidating your Ramadan. I could not believe that that's what he said. He was like, alhamdulillah for wudu. First time okay, yes, of course, alhamdulillah for wudu. We're very clean. But when he said that, no. So the Rasul specifically told us, except while you're fasting, right? So you want to just do it very barely, and then you don't gargle, keep it low so nothing goes up there, and obviously don't exaggerate, right? Some people are like trying to get all in, and then they just literally spit it all out. No, this is very, very simple, right? Okay, so you do that with the swirling the water. You do that 3 times. So the first action, in, out, exaggerate when you do it, and 3 times. Okay. If you used separate hands, you did your mouth 3 times, then you did your nose 3 times, by all scholars, that is valid, and that is fine. Okay? And then washing the nose, according to the mouth and nose, according to the majority of scholars, is actually a sunnah, like I just mentioned. In some madhahib, they actually consider it wajib. They actually consider it a fard. Although, you know, evidence shows otherwise. Other evidence shows otherwise. Anyhow, washing the face 3 times from the hairline to the jawbone, ear to ear, right? We mentioned that. The majority of scholars said, obviously, this is sunnah. Let's see. Some scholars said this is a wajib. If you miss it intentionally, you are sinning, but your wudu is valid. The ears. Because the Rasul said the ears are part of the face. So some scholars said if you miss the ears, you're okay. But we said again, you're perfecting your wudu now, right? So you got your face, and then you got like that, right? Or some people said with the pinky, you kind of go in out of the ears, and then with your thumbs back here, okay? And you do that 3 times, right? This is the perfect wudu we're getting to. Okay, next. What about the face for the beard and the guys? They said if you can see the skin where the beard is, then you should scrub it so water is all in there. If you cannot, then they said just running your fingers through your beard is good enough. Fine? Good. All right. Let's see. Okay. And I mentioned the sideburn. Okay, now you're going to wash both arms up to the elbows. Both arms up to the elbows. Some scholars even mention a handcuff this high, right? That's the perfect way when you go like that. So how do you take the water? When you scoop the water, you take it, you go up, right? And then here, down, and you interlace your fingers, right? Interlace your fingers. You do that 3 times with the right hand and then arm, and then you do that 3 times on the left arm. Then you wipe over the head, starting with the forelock and going back to the neck, coming back to the forelock, and we mentioned, the ears are here. Did I put it with the face?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I knew I was saying something. So the ears are with the head. So now, when you do that, you take and by the way, this is not using new water. After you do your arms 3 times, boom, 2, 3, and some scholars said you only have to do this once, but anyhow, I just got into a habit. Then 3, 1, 2, 3. Now, you already have water on your hands. You start here, go here, come back, and then the ears. Got it? Make sense? Confusion, not confusion. One time, some of the Shafi'i scholars mention 3 because there is a narration that mentioned 3, but that narration is weak. that narration is weak. We don't have the Prophet ﷺ authentically doing the head more than once.
When you're wiping the head, do you just take it back, or do you do back and then back and then?
The sunnah is here and come back. The minimum is here, according to the Hanabila, according to the Shafi'i. Even for some of the sisters, they can literally yank it up, boom, they're done. And then according to Abu Hanifa, literally just a little bit here, that's it. Boom, right? Because it's a wipe. It's not a soak it in there type deal, right? All right, good. We mentioned that. All right, okay. Yeah, because then, by the way, about going back and forth, it's narrated all of them. So there is a narration when the Prophet ﷺ went here and didn't come back. There's a narration that he went down here, then came back. There's a narration that he did this up to the hairline back here and then came back. So they're all reported, right? And that just goes to show you, whichever one you do, no problem, right? Okay, cool. Wash the feet up to the ankles 3 times. 3 times. The minimum is to wipe. Again, you could take water in your hand, and it can be wet, and you can go down. For some people who can't take the foot and lift it 3 feet, right? So you can, but you got to make sure you're covering the mandatory part, right? Because how many times is minimum for the foot? 1 time. But you have 3 is the sunnah. So you want to at least get your foot completely. That's one thing that's very important, okay? And it's a sunnah to wash the feet, to have like water going through it, okay? What about in a public sink? What do you do there? Well, that's where you have this benefit where you could just take the water and do it down there, right? Because some people, they think that you're homeless. They think that that's where you're showering. One guy actually told me this. He literally told me that. And you'll find that in a public sink, and there's a rahmah in where the Rasul ﷺ gave us the concession about wiping over socks. We're going to cover that next week. And the beauty about that, I'll give you a little intro here, is that what you want to do is just in the morning, make sure you have your wudu, right, on your feet, everything. And so when you wear socks or shoes, as long as those socks or shoes are covering the mandatory part, so now some people wear those ankle socks, you can't make wudu over that. You can't wipe over those because they're not covering the ankle, right? Let's say I wanted to make wudu over my shoes. These I couldn't because these loafers, they don't cover all the way up to my ankles, right? I can't. If you wanted to do them, I would say like those are fine. They have to cover your ankles. That would be, then you can wipe over those shoes, right? And that makes it a lot easier. You don't have to, because don't forget a lot of things we're doing da'wah in all of the actions we're doing. When you're praying here and some people see you pray, they must be Muslim, things like that. Even sometimes I heard some people speaking as they were passing by, and I hear them. Oh my God, what is he doing? And she's like, oh, he's Muslim. I've seen that before. Well, I heard them say that as they're passing by. Now, I probably shouldn't have been hearing that, but hey, you heard it. It is what it is. But nonetheless. Okay, actions related to wudu. These are virtues. You want to wash your hands first upon waking up. There's a hadith about that. And the reason why the Prophet ﷺ ordered the companion not to immerse their hands in the water when they wake up is because the hands could become najis by touching a part of the body while you're sleeping that's najis, right? And so that's the reason that, when they would have like little buckets of water, if you could think about it, and people would go and make wudu with them. But he said, for somebody who just woke up, don't go sticking your hands in there. I like these things, right? These are good community rules, right? So you want to have cleanliness, so you wash your hands outside of the bucket first, make sure any filth. And you know what? Somebody even told me, they were a chemical engineering student, and they said that washing your hands 3 times, even without soap or anything, even removes 90% of the bacteria and stuff, and they said the actual remaining part is actually not bad bacteria for you. Or somebody needs to look into that. So that's what they told me. Science keeps changing. And I don't care if it changes or not. I stick with this anyway. I'm just throwing that out there. Anyhow, okay. All right. Use the miswak before each salah, with each wudu. Before each salah and with each wudu. The Rasul ﷺ is recorded as doing it with every salah. He's also recorded as doing it with every single wudu. Here's the thing though, some scholars said you do not do it, use the siwak while you're fasting after salat al-dhuhr. Everybody hear that? No? So then ignore it, because it's a weak hadith anyway. Keep not hearing it. You never heard it. Let's move on. All right. And also, why is the siwak such a beautiful thing? Well, everybody knows how the Prophet ﷺ died in his house with Aisha. If you never read that part of the Sunnah in the Prophet's life, very it's a tough thing to read and listen to. But he wanted the siwak right before he died. So Aisha radiallahu anha, she softened it up and she started doing the siwak for him. And there's a lot of a lot of benefits we can have from that. And that's always trying to meet Allah in a good state, right? Yeah, and that's why the malaika are turned off by people with bad breath, people with bad smells, all this stuff. And it really encourages you to be a clean person, that you're not affecting negatively those around you. All right, so use the siwak as much as you can. All right. And some scholars mentioned, I don't need to mention that. Okay, also washing between the toes with your pinky finger. That's also a sunnah, with your pinky finger. The Rasul ﷺ mentioned that. Okay. He said, I saw the Prophet ﷺ, one of the companions reported, I saw the Prophet ﷺ while he was performing wudu and doing that to the toes with his feet, with his pinky. So he was going like that with his pinky, his left pinky. You should try to do it with your left pinky. Okay. All right, moving on. Start all the actions of wudu. Again, these are part of the sunnah, from with the right side, then the left side. If you decided it's time for the arms, I did my left, then I did my right, did you invalidate the wudu? The answer is no. Aisha radiallahu anha, she said that the Prophet ﷺ loved to start with his right. Okay, and then we'll wrap up here. Reciting the dua of wudu after completing wudu. What is the dua of wudu after completing it? If you don't know this dua, guys, you've been missing out on a lot. The Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, for the one who perfects their wudu and says, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. It's just the shahada. He said they will be allowed to choose from any of the 8 gates of paradise. You understand that? Like, that's shocking. When I first heard this, I was like, why isn't this 101 that they teach us with salah? Did you say shahada after wudu? Like, this should be automatic. Like, they tell us this. And I mean it. That tells you 2 things. One, really, when you perfect your wudu, he said if you perfect your ahsan al-wudu, that you made it so beautiful, you're recognizing you're going to go stand in front of Allah. That's why you found some of the companions, what's narrated about them, that they would be trembling slightly while they're making wudu. Some of the tabi'een didn't understand that. Just, what's wrong? Why are you like shaking a little? And they tell, what do you mean what's wrong with me? Don't you know who I'm going to go meet right now? I'm going to go stand in front of Allah, the Lord of the worlds, the Creator. You look at me like I'm this good person. You don't know what I really do. Allah knows everything. Allah knows if you're cursing. Allah knows if you're watching something bad. Allah knows if you're listening to your mother, you're not. Allah knows if you have a girlfriend, if you have a boyfriend, if you're all of that stuff. He knows. And a lot of times he's hidden that from the people. And so when you're gonna go stand in front of Allah and you're gonna ask Allah for forgiveness, it's time to own up to those things. And that's why when you recognize that, Allah said He forgives you between this salah and the next salah, all of those minor sins you've done in between, because of that important part. Okay? Now, not wasting water when making wudu is also part of perfecting it. And that is, the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's reported about him that he used to use 1 sa' of water for wudu, and that comes out to about half a liter. It's also recommended to pray 2 rak'at after you make wudu. 2 rak'at after you make wudu. And I think that will cover up to there, because the rest is now wiping over socks, what type of socks, and that whole stuff. Does anybody have any questions about that? So, wudu can be very detailed. Yeah.
Does the dua include Allah Mujamin and Sawali Mujamin?
No. that's different. That hadith the Prophet ﷺ specifically said was perfecting your wudu, ahsan al-wudu, and then you say the shahada. Yep.
So I had a question. I'm not sure if you're gonna cover it next week or not. But so if you make wudu and then you put on your socks, and then say after like 30, 40 minutes, you take your socks off, but you didn't wait for it.
We're gonna cover that next week.
You still have your wudu.
We're gonna cover that next week.
I might not be
Long
here next
discussion.
week, that's why I'm asking.
You what?
I might not be here next week.
No, wait, it's recorded. It's recorded.
He's recording. Yeah, there you go.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I don't know if you covered this one before, what's the benefit of sleeping with wudu, in a state of wudu?
The benefit, the Rasul ﷺ said, Allah Azza wa Jal, if a person makes wudu and recites Ayat al-Kursi before they sleep, Allah will assign you a malaika to guard you the entire time until you wake up. And some people protect you completely. I mean, this goes into another whole different ball game. You know, we're opening up something else. You know, I could tell you, long story short, when we covered the topic of jinn and stuff like that, there was one scholar, he was, reading Quran and things like that, and the jinn spoke to him. It's pretty freaky, and he says, if you don't stop, trying to get rid of me from this girl, he says, I'm in love with her. I'm married to her, I'm in love with her. If you don't stop, I'll come to you and you live at this place. Your wife's name is this, your children's name is this. He literally names them all right there. And he smiled and he said, that's fine. He kept on reciting Quran. The next day he came. Now why I will tell you this is very important. The next day he came back and he's reciting Quran on this girl, and the jinn comes back and he says, I visited you last night. He said, and I couldn't get to you. And he said, you read Ayat al-Kursi. He said, Allah sent an angel outside guarding your home. I couldn't come near you. And when I come back and after I hear this, and by the way, I didn't need this scholar to write this this experience he had. We had the Prophet ﷺ telling us. So that's even more beneficial, right? And that's why I like these stories are nice, but I find those stories similar to science. Some people, they tie these stories, and until you see this crazy experience, that's when you finally believe. But it's enough that the Prophet ﷺ told us that Allah is sending a unique malaika to guard you, guard you and your home and keep you guys safe. And what I want to know is what kind of, beast type malaika is this that nobody wants to come near? I mean, right? This is like the security guard, right? I mean, talk about that Secret Service, right? That's the way to go. And that's why I told you that little story, because it's really important. So there is a lot of benefits to doing that.
I have a follow-up question.
Yeah.
So is sleeping in the state of wudu increase your chances of seeing the Prophet in a dream?
A lot of people ask that, and the answer is no. What we will tell you is that your heart is going to incline towards what it loves. And that's why there was one day a companion, they woke up and they were crying the entire night, the entire day. And it was, I think it was a female companion, and her son, he kept asking her, what's wrong? She said, since the Prophet ﷺ passed away, I can't remember the amount of days. She said it's like 2 or 3 years. She said, I saw him in my dream every night. Last night was the first time I didn't see him. And what you come back and realize is it's about the level of iman, the level that you're going through in your personal life, that you're trying to implement the sunnah in your life. But then you get people says, well, is that sunnah or fard? That's not the right mindset. That's not the type of attitude that you have that, right? Alhamdulillah. Yep.
So if you make wudu before you go to bed and then you go to bed, but before you fall asleep you lose your wudu, is that just invalid again?
No, you're fine. That's it. You did your part. Yeah. You made wudu, you read Ayat al-Kursi, that's it. You'll never fall asleep if I told you otherwise. You keep running to the bathroom. No, that's it. You did that. You performed the sunnah. Anybody else? Oh, sorry, I didn't see it.
So if you're saying the shahada, can you say that in front of the sink as well?
Yeah, you mean if you're in that conundrum where the toilet and the sink type situation?
Just in general.
There's nothing wrong to say anything in front of the sink. It's just in front of the toilet you can't. That's the problem. The only problem that your scenario would come up is if the sink is in front of the toilet. And in that case, the scholars said just say it when you leave the restroom. Because it's not part of wudu, remember. You can just walk away. And no difference than saying the Bismillah. Step outside, say Bismillah, walk in, make your wudu. If you really want to go technical, just take a cup, folks, and go outside and make wudu. It's really not rocket science. It's just we freak out. Oh my God, I don't have a faucet. We're really spoiled, you know. I don't want to get into that right now. I really don't, because then we'll be here till 7. You're already skipping part of your night class. All right. Any other questions? Going once, going twice, sold. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لكم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. See you guys next week, inshallah.